No. Well, we're not in the office. Excuse me, we are in the office today, not in the car. I know that some of you understandably think that my office is the car, and in some ways, and sometimes it is. I legitimately sometimes speak to clients on the phone in the car. Nonetheless, that happens more often here. And sometimes we have to make car videos in the office, underscoring the point that we have to be flexible when it comes to so many things in our life. This video will probably be short, so hang on tight for the next 30 minutes, because when I say that, half the time they're longer videos. No, I think this will be a short one today, legitimately. So, couple things basically that I want to talk about, mainly just announcements that I want you to know. The first thing is that we will have a free group coaching session, on Thursday, this Thursday, September 14th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time in the United States. Thursday, September 14th, 4 p.m. Eastern in the United States time zone. If you're a member of my mailing list / newsletter, you will get the Zoom information. If you would like to become a member and are not already a member, I'll put the link below for my newsletter sign up. You can sign up, and I'll send the Zoom link out before the session starts on Thursday. So don't worry if you don't get the link right away. You will get the link on Thursday, if not beforehand, if not earlier. So yeah, these group sessions have been really good the last couple of months when we've done them. A lot of good insights from people, a lot of good sharing of opinions and approaches. So I'm looking forward to this one. And if you've never joined us and are interested in, interacting with other people in this crazy LOA, law of assumption community, in a civil, mature way, then I hope you join us Thursday. Which leads us perfectly to the next announcement I want to make, which is Marvin, who has a YouTube channel called, I think, Marvin's Room 30. He's had a YouTube channel for a couple of years. I had never heard of it until a few weeks ago when he reached out to me. But he's got a good YouTube channel where he talks about these law of assumption and manifesting ideas in a very common sense way that is sorely lacking in the law of attraction community at large, and specifically, I would say, in the law of assumption space. And Marvin feels the same way that I do about this, and actually speaks about it some, which is unusual. So he invited me on to have a chat, and I gladly accepted when I realized that he talked about this stuff in a similar way that I do in regards to how toxic and not mature and not civil the Neville law of assumption community often is. When we do these group sessions, or in general, like with both our channels, I think it's trying to shed light on these ideas and share these ideas in a very civil, mature, gentle, communicative fashion with each other. I know I use a lot of rough language and I'm very vulgar a lot of the time, but it's because I feel strongly that this law of assumption community is basically pulling one over on you in regards to how bombastically dogmatic and negative and critical people are in the law of assumption community to others that they don't even know. So unfortunately, so much of this great law of assumption advice has been destroyed basically by the online community. And it sucks. So I use very negative language to describe that intentionally. But when, I talk to people one-on-one, when I engage with people, actually engage with them, like we'll do with group coaching on Thursday, generally, we try to be as open minded and civil and nice to each other as we can, because that is how to learn and grow and feel good while you're learning and growing, um, in regards to this stuff. And I think that, again, is just common sense. I always thought it was just common sense when it came to this law of attraction, law of assumption stuff. But since getting more immersed in the online community the last, I'd say, 2 years or so, first with the podcast and then by making these silly car and occasionally office videos, I've realized that the online community, especially the law of assumption online community, really needs to be called out for its inappropriate, um, toxic behavior. And dare I say it, it's bullying. It's bullying behavior. The Me Too movement has not caught up to the law of assumption community yet, folks. Um, so anyway, Marvin and I had a really in-depth conversation about this. I know I've spoken to Melissa Basie a little bit about this, but she doesn't really know about the community. She just knows more about, utilizing Neville's ideas with people in therapy. And obviously, I've spoken to Cecilia about this a lot, because she's, my friend, and also was the moderator of the Neville subreddit and has had shit pictures sent to her before. So she knows more than even I, just the toxicity of this community, unfortunately. I've spoken to Cecilia about it multiple times, on camera. You can see our ex Neville mod discussions to hear some of that. But I don't think I'd ever had a video YouTube chat where we went into as much depth about how toxic and why the law of assumption community is so toxic than the conversation that Marvin and I had the other day. Um, so I think it's a really worthwhile conversation to watch if you're interested in Neville and the law of assumption community. Um, Marvin posted the video yesterday, and I will link below to our conversation, and I will also link above, or try to link above, to our conversation as well. So that's really all I wanted to talk about today. Just basically make those announcements. One final thing. I might have mentioned this before, but I thought I would mention it again here because Marvin and I mentioned her. Um, I think it's funny that I very rarely mention Florence Scovel Shin on this, in my podcast or in these videos. I did mention her in The Law of Attraction Simplified. But it is interesting because when I got into these ideas, first I found Wallace Wattles, and then the person who really like profoundly shook me was Neville. That was when I was like, wow, this stuff is legitimate, right? And I saw relatively quick success implementing his ideas in terms of like being able to relax more, having more free time, being able to leave my job in real estate that I did not like. All that happened, relatively quickly, within a period of months after discovering Neville's ideas. Um, but the other teacher besides Neville, I would say, I did find Joseph Murphy, shortly after Neville, but he didn't affect me as much as Florence Scovel Shin initially. It was Neville, Florence Scovel Shin, and Murphy that I found like in 2014 that really all in some way shaped my outlook on this stuff. And maybe I found Richard Dodds by the end of 2014, now that I come to think of it. Um, but Murphy, I grew to appreciate more and more as time passed. Shin, Florence Scovel Shin, on the other hand, really was a great introduction to these ideas. And she's such a, like a, what's the word, like folksy type of teacher. She's got so many good sayings and stuff. It really was a helpful and good introduction to so many of these manifesting ideas. And I really liked, I mean, I still like her books are terrific, and I liked what she had to say. Um, but interestingly, and this is why I just thought this was a good place to mention it, because Marvin and I talk about Florence Scovel Shin in our conversation. Um, Interestingly, Florence Scovel Shin is one of those teachers that I was very into in my law of attraction journey, if you want to call it that, the beginning of it. and then gradually just fell off. Like I hardly ever think of her anymore, and I hardly ever look at her books or her teachings. Um, so I just thought that's interesting, and that's like what happens with a lot of these different teachers. If you get into this for a while, there's teachers that will affect you profoundly and continue to affect you kind of profoundly. Neville's like that for me. And then there's teachers like Shin who might initially be very, very helpful, but then you kind of, um, stop going to, or, thinking about after a while. Um, I think I was really into Florence for like a year or so, maybe 2 years. But now, like I said, since then, no, I just don't really think of her. I think she's terrific, and I think she, for many people, is a better introduction to these ideas than Neville is. But I don't think of her that often anymore. And then there are teachers like Joseph Murphy was for me, where I found out about him pretty early on, liked his stuff, thought it was very similar to Neville's in a good way. But really, it wasn't until several years later, I'm trying to think, probably 3, 4 years later, where I really looked at Murphy again and was like, holy shit, this guy is great. This guy is phenomenal. Like, this guy is just as good a teacher as Neville. When I looked at Murphy's stuff back in 2014, I didn't think that whatsoever. I thought he was good, but I was like, Neville's where it's at. And now I go back and look at Murphy for my own stuff, for my own work on myself. And I definitely suggest Murphy's ideas much more often than I suggest Neville's ideas to clients. So it's interesting. That might not be the case in your experiences, but it's just to give you an example of how our relationship to certain teachings, approaches, and teachers changes as we get more and more used to these different manifesting ideas, and as our law of attraction journey continues. And that always excites me. I'm always excited to find new teachers, or to look at an old teacher in a new way. Like that happened to me earlier this year with Joel Goldsmith, who I think I first encountered in 2015 or 2016. Liked his stuff, but just couldn't sustainably get into it because it just sounded too religious. Then I've said this a couple times on this channel. When I got back into his stuff like last year, it was just well, more so even in some ways than when I rediscovered Murphy. I got back into Goldsmith, and I was like, wow, this is like the absolute method, or the golden key, or whatever you want to call it, resting in God. This is like the best explanation of that I've seen. So I found Joel Goldsmith's advice extremely helpful the last year or so. And it took me 6 years to get there. For basically 5 or 6 years, I didn't even look at his stuff. So teachers and teachings and approaches help you in different ways at different times. And that's an exciting, great thing. And it's always exciting to find new teachings and teachers that, that you like, that resonate with you as you go along. That's always exciting. Yeah. So I recommend looking at Marvin's conversation with me, and I hope you join us for the free group session on Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you have personal questions or want one-on-one coaching with me, the deep stuff, I can be reached at info@radicalcounselor.com, or you can just contact me via my website, radicalcounselor.com. Until next time.